Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Time was a curious thing. Lucas often thought in all his years of studying magic, nothing had fascinated him more than the fleeting, ungraspable nature of it. He could master the elements, bend light, and even command forces of nature, but time had always been the one element that remained beyond his reach until now. It began as an accident, though. Few would believe it. Lucas, a mage of considerable talent but little renown, had been sifting through ancient scrolls in the academy, dimly lit archive. The air was thick with the smell of dust and old parchment, and the only sounds were the scratching of his quill and the faint crackling of the torches on the stone wall. He was searching for a way to recover lost moments, to undo the mistakes of the past. For Lucas, this wasn't just idle curiosity. It was personal. The memory of his sister, Marin, lingered in the back of his mind like a shadow that refused to fade. It had been a year since the fever had taken her, and no matter what magic Lucas had learned since, nothing could bring her back. But here in these scrolls lay whispers of a different kind of magic. The parchment he had found was old, nearly crumbling in his hands, but the symbols were clear. A spell to manipulate the flow of time itself. He had read about such spells before, but they were always dismissed as legend, too dangerous to be practiced. Yet something in the faded ink, something in the way the words felt as he read them aloud, told Lucas this was real. He hadn't meant to cast the spell right then and there. It was only meant to be an experiment, a brief flicker of magic to test the water. But the moment he uttered the final word, the world around him shifted. The air grew thick, and his surroundings blurred, as if the very fabric of reality was being twisted. For a brief, heart-stopping second, Lucas found himself standing not in the dusty archives, but in a bright sunlit courtyard, a courtyard he hadn't seen in years. Marin was there, playing as she always had when they were children. Lucas's breath caught in his throat. It couldn't be real, could it? He reached out, his hand trembling, but before he could take a step, the world snapped back into play. He was back in the archives, the scrolls still in his hands, but everything felt wrong. It started with the little things. His quill, which had been lying on the desk, was now on the floor. The bookshelves seemed slightly off, as if they had been rearranged. But it wasn't until Lucas stepped outside into the academy grounds that he realized the full extent of what had happened. The sky, which had always been a clear, crisp blue at this time of year, was now streaked with strange, shifting clouds. The academy itself seemed different, older, more worn. Lucas' heart raced. He hadn't just glimpsed the past, he had changed it. Panic set in. He needed to fix this, needed to understand what he had done. But as Lucas scrambled to find a way to undo the spell, a voice called out to him from the shadows of the courtyard. You've meddled with forces you don't understand. Lucas spun around to see a woman standing there, her silver hair gleaming in the fading light. She wore robes of deep indigo, and in her hand was a staff etched with celestial symbols. Her eyes, cold and calculating, seemed to see right through him. "Who are you?" Lucas asked, his voice hoarse. The woman stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his. "Vivian. An astrologer. I've been tracking the disturbances in the stars for days. I knew someone had tampered with time, but I didn't think it would be a foolhardy maid." Lucas opened his mouth to protest, but Vivian raised a hand to silence him. "You have no idea what you've done, do you? Every action, every change in the timeline has consequences. And now, thanks to you, those consequences are unraveling everything." Before Lucas could respond, a sudden rumble shook the ground. He staggered, grabbing onto a nearby pillar for support. Vivian's expression darkened. "We don't have time for this," she muttered. "There's a warrior, Derek, who's been dealing with the fallout of your little experiment. Armies that shouldn't exist are appearing out of thin air. You've altered the past, Lucas, and now we have to fix it." Lucas had spun armies? What armies? How could his small experiment have caused something so massive? But the look in Vivian's eyes told him everything he needed to know. This was real, and it was far worse than he had imagined. Together, they made their way through the academy's sad halls, the eerie quiet, only broken by the occasional tremor shaking the wall. Vivian led him to a small chamber at the edge of the academy where Derek waited. He was every bit the warrior Lucas had expected, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down the side of his face. He looked like a man who had seen too many battles. "You must be Lucas," Derek said, his voice gruff but not unkind. "The one who caused this mess." Lucas swallowed hard. I didn't mean to. I know Derek cut him off, but that doesn't change the fact that we've got armies from a kingdom that was supposed to be wiped out centuries ago marching on us. You altered something in the past, and now they read back. Lucas' mind raced. He hadn't meant for this to happen. He'd only wanted to see Maureen again, just for a moment. But now the consequences of his actions were spiraling out of control, and the weight of his mistake pressed down on him like a heavy stone. There's more, Vivian said, her voice grim. I've just been tracking the movements of the stars, and they were pointing to something far worse. There's an organization, a group that's just been watching for centuries, waiting for someone like you to come along. They call themselves the Chrono Order, and they've been waiting for the chance to seize control of time itself. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. What do they want? To rewrite history in their favor, Derek said, his jaw clenched. They've been meddling with time for centuries, but they've never had the power to make significant changes. Until now, they'll be coming for you, Lucas. And if they get their hands on you. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Lucas understood all too well. The weight of what he had done settled on his shoulders, like a cloak of lead. He had wanted to save one life, but in doing so, he had thrown the entire timeline into chaos. Now, it wasn't just his own future that was at stake. It was the future of the entire world. We have to fix this, Lucas said, his voice barely above a whisper. I have to fix this. Vivian nodded, her expression softening for the first time since they had met. We will, but it won't be easy. The timeline is fractured, and every time you use your magic, it splinters even further. We'll need to be careful, and we'll need to move fast. Derek slung a massive sword over his shoulder, his eyes hard as steel. Let's get to work. The tremors grew more frequent as Lucas, Vivian, and Derek hurried through the fractured academy ground. The once sturdy walls of stone seemed to warp and flicker, as if reality itself was coming undone. Lucas felt the weight of it all, the gravity of what he'd done pulling at him from every direction. But there was no time for regret, not now. Vivian kept her eyes on the skies, her staff glowing faintly with arcane energy. The Chrono Order knows we'll be here. They'll come for us soon. We have to get to the timeless realm before they do. How do we even get there? Lucas asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though his insides churned with fear. I've only ever used time magic once, and look what that caused. Vivian gave him a sharp look. The timeless realm isn't bound by the same rules as here. It's not about controlling time. It's not about surviving in a place where past, present, and future all exist at once. You'll need to hold yourself together, Lucas. If you lose focus, you could get stuck in a loop, reliving the same moment forever. Derek, ever the practical one, stepped forward. So what do we do once we're there? Fight this chronarch and break the time wheel. That's not the plan, Vivian said, her tone grim, but don't underestimate him. The chronarch has been manipulating timelines for centuries, pulling strings from the shadows. He will know every possible outcome of this confrontation before we even step foot in his domain. Lucas felt a shiver crawl down his spine. This was no ordinary enemy. The chronarch had power beyond anything Lucas could comprehend, and he could already feel the creeping edges of time-sense distortion pulling at the corners of his mind. If they failed, not only would history be rewritten, he could lose himself entirely. They reached the entrance to the chamber where the portal to the timeless realm would open. Lucas hesitated, his hand hovering over the ancient runes etched into the stone floor. Are you sure this is the only way? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vivian's eyes softened just for a moment. There's always another way, Lucas, but sometimes the only choice we have is the hardest one. Taking a deep breath, Lucas pressed his hand to the rune. The world around them blurred, the lines between space and time folding inward. For a split second, everything went silent. No tremors, no sounds of war in the distance, just an overwhelming stillness. And then they were there. The timeless realm stretched out before them, an endless expanse where time moved in ways Lucas couldn't describe. He could see past and future flickering in and out of existence at the edges of his vision, entire lifetimes playing out in mere seconds before vanishing again. The ground beneath them was solid, yet ever shifting, like walking on the surface of a dream. Stay close, Vivian warned. The chronarch controls this place. He'll try to pull you into a timeline of his choosing. Derek unsheathed his sword, its blade gleaming in the strange, ever-shifting light. Let him try. They moved cautiously through the timeless realm, each step feeling as though it spanned both an eternity and no time at all. Lucas could feel the magic tugging at him, pulling at his mind. Memories of his past flickered before him. His childhood with Maureen, their laughter, her illness, her death. It all felt so real, as if he could reach out and change it. But he forced himself to focus, to remember why they were here. Vivian led them deeper into the heart of the realm, her staff glowing brighter with each step. "We were close. The time wheel should be just beyond this ridge." But as they crested the rise, the air around them shimmered, and a figure emerged from the swirling mists of time, the Chrono. He stood tall and imposing, draped in robes of dark flowing fabric that seemed to ripple like liquid shadow. His face was obscured by a mask of polished silver, but his eyes, cold, calculating, burned with a malevolent light. Lucas," the Chronarch said, his voice smooth and filled with dark amusement. "You've come to fix your mistake. How noble of you, but you read too late. Time has already begun to unravel, and soon I will be its master." Lucas tightened his grip on his staff. "I want to let you rewrite history." The Chronarch chuckled softly. "You've already done it for me. Every time you used your magic, you opened the door for me to seize control. You are more powerful than you realize, Lucas. Join me, and together we can reshape time as we see fit." "You could save your sister, undo every tragedy you've ever known." The temptation was like a physical weight pressing down on Lucas' chest. He could see her, could hear her voice in his mind calling to him, but Derek says, voice cut through the fog. "Don't listen to him, Lucas. You know what, Sarah, right? You know what happens when people like him gain power." Lucas closed his eyes, struggling against the pull of the Chronarch's word. He thought of Maureen, of the life they had lost, but he also thought of Vivian and Derek, of the countless lives that would be destroyed if the Chronarch succeeded. "I can see," Lucas whispered, his voice shaking. "I can tell you win." The Chronarch's eyes narrowed behind his mask. "Then you will die here with the rest of your pathetic timeline." With a wave of his hand, the Chronarch summoned the power of the time wheel, and the air around them began to ripple. The ground cracked and split as time itself fractured, creating echoes of past and future realities that flickered and danced like ghosts. Derek charged forward, his sword slicing through the swirling chaos. Vivian followed, her staff glowing with celestial energy as she cast protective wards around them. But the Chronarch was too powerful, his control over the timeless realm absolute. Lucas watched as Derek and Vivian fought valiantly, but it was clear they were outmatched. The Chronarch's power was overwhelming, and the time wheel pulsed with dark energy, threatening to consume them all. In that moment, Lucas knew what he had to do. Gathering every ounce of his strength, he raised his staff and focused on the one thing that had always driven him, his love for his sister and his desire to protect those he cared about. He couldn't change the past, but he could control the present. With a cry, Lucas unleashed a surge of time magic, not to alter history, but to freeze it. The entire realm shuddered as time ground to a halt, everything locked in place, the Chronarch, the time wheel, even Derek and Vivian. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, with painstaking slowness, Lucas began to unravel the Chronarch's hold on the timeless realm. He could feel the magic pulling at him, trying to drag him into the abyss, but he held firm, focusing on the threads of time and severing them one by one. The Chronarch screamed in rage as his power was ripped from him, but it was too late. Lucas' magic surged through the timeless realm, restoring the balance and breaking the Chronarch's control. The time wheel shattered with a deafening crack, and the Chronarch dissolved into nothingness, his body consumed by the very magic he had sought to control. As the timeless realm began to collapse around them, Lucas turned to Vivian and Derek, who were just beginning to stir as time resumed its natural flow. Over, Lucas said, his voice hoarse. "The Chronarch is gone." Vivian nodded, though her expression was somber, but the cough. Lucas knew what she meant. He could feel it in his bones, the connection to time magic, the very thing that had once given him power, was gone. He had severed it willingly to save them all. He would never be able to use time magic again. But for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. The timeless realm crumbled around them, and as they stepped through the fading portal back to their own world, Lucas took one last look at the place where past, present, and future had converged. Time was no longer his to control, and that he realized was exactly as it should be.